want to kind of start out and let's talk about boat insurance a little bit. So this comes up periodically. Most people recognize that you need to have insurance on a boat if you want the boat covered. One of the big things that people don't think about, though, is pollution liability. So on a boat policy, you could buy, just like you could endorse it. Some policies homeowners policies will allow you to endorse a boat if it's under a certain horsepower and a certain length. You could just add that to your home insurance for liability purposes. The problem that you run into with that is oftentimes that will not include pollution. Or sometimes the policies that you might buy from some cut rate insurance companies that you find online are also doing the same thing. They're giving you like $500,000 of liability, but it's not for pollution liability. And that can be a big issue if you had a major problem like boat sinks, right? And now you're forced to bring out cleanup. The EPA requires, it's just under $1 million, just like $997,000 that they can charge for cleanup. And if you don't have the proper marine insurance, you could be left holding the bag for that. So it's really important for a boat policy to cover pollution liability up to the federal requirement. And the policies that I write, that's the way I always do it, is we always want to make sure that that pollution liability is covered, because that's a huge deal. That's a bigger deal than if like, hey, my prop hit a rock and it's costing me $5,000 to get the prop fixed on my motor. That's way more of an inconvenience, whereas the pollution is more of like, hey, you're going bankrupt now, buddy. So make sure when you're thinking about boat insurance, first thing off, you want to make sure that you have pollution liability to make sure it's covered if you have something unfortunate happen out on the water. The other thing to think about when it comes to boat insurance is the value of the boat itself, right? So there's different ways they value that. They can have replacement costs, they can have repair costs, they can have actual cash value. So you want to kind of dive down that tunnel a little bit to make sure, hey, do I have an agreed value on my boat that if something happens to the boat, I'm going to get up to $50,000? Is it actual cash value where they say, hey, whatever that boat would sell for before the accident, that's what we're going to cover it for? Or is it a replacement cost where they say, we'll go buy you another boat? So there's different valuations on the whole. Fishing equipment is something that people don't think about a lot. So you could buy some fish finders, you're buying downriggers, you're buying a lot of different stuff that you're putting on the boat that is not automatically covered by your boat policy. So you would want to add endorsements to cover your equipment, fishing equipment specifically, but it could be lots of other different types of equipment that you might add. You might have sonar and stuff like that. So whatever you have on your boat, make sure you talk with your agent about it so they can make sure it's covered. The other part of it is you're going to have for your repairs, you're going to have, again, you could have a whole valuation on one spot, but then how are they going to cover the repairs in the event that your prop does hit a rock and now you have to take it in? I've seen it go both ways where people just want to buy the least expensive and then they go, okay, well, they're going to cover you actual cash value and that's not repair cost and it's not enough to repair it. And then the customer gets frustrated. And it's like, well, if you spent $50 more, you would have had repair cost instead of actual cash value. So make sure you're paying attention to some of those sub issues. Oftentimes, the difference between a good boat policy and a cheap boat policy is $200 to $300. Now, that sounds like a lot in the course of like, hey, I don't want to spend $200 or $300 more on this insurance for my boat. But then when there's an actual claim, the difference in how it pays out is going to be thousands of dollars difference. So you're going to have, instead of a $200 or $300 savings, it's actually costing you, in the event of a claim, it could be costing you $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 difference in the cost of that claim, putting the pollution liability aside. So it is something to be aware of, to be cognizant of. Maybe you don't care and you go, you know what, if something happens to my boat, I don't care. I just want to make sure that I'm covered for liability. Well, then focus on that. But if you're worried about something happening in your boat, like I was talking to somebody the other day, one of my customers, and he's like, this is my therapy. I need to make sure my boat's taken care of. I need to be able to go fishing. If something happens, I need it fixed. If that's your approach, make sure you have the right policy. Just make sure you talk that through with the agent, because you might be getting a policy, but it's not going to act the way you think it will because you saved a couple $100 a year up front. But then when you have a claim, it doesn't get you back where you were. So that's kind of the boat. We could go down deeper, but I'll just kind of highlight the coverages, high level coverages. You're going to have your whole coverage. You're going to have personal property, attached equipment, which would be like those fish finders. You're going to have liability, which is going to be both liability if you hit something, like you hit another boat, you hit, God forbid, you hit somebody in the water. And then you're going to have pollution liability. You're going to have uninsured watercraft. So if somebody hits you with no insurance and they damage your boat. And then you're going to have medical payments, which is somebody gets hurt. It's not necessarily your fault, your liability. You just feel bad they got hurt on your boat. We cover that. You're going to have towing. Towing is one that's a lot of times people don't think about, but you can have towing on your boat. That can get expensive if you break down out in the bay and you got to be towed back in. So that might be something you might want to make sure that you have coverage for, or if you're okay self-insuring. So those are some big things. And then you're going to have like motors, trolling motors, as well as the main motor, and then trailer coverage. So those are all things important to be concerned about. If your boat's parked in the garage of your home, it's not going to be covered on your home. That's going to be covered on the boat policy. So some people are like, I don't need the boat policy through the wintertime because I'm not using it. It's like, well, if you care about the boat still, you're probably still going to want to have that coverage in place, because your homeowners isn't going to cover it.